Hey everybody, Jim the Tabletop Engineer here, and welcome to a new episode. As you can tell, this is not my new workshop or my old workshop. This is not going to be a crafting video. Instead, I have been pondering while I've been unpacking. I just recently moved. My family moved into a new home, and I have not yet got my workshop back to functional. As a matter of fact, I'm having a hard time finding a lot of things. Just in the craziness of the move, boxes got mislabeled or put somewhere. I mean, we're still sort of unpacking boxes a few days after the move, and I have not been able to find all of my stuff. Can't find my goggles. They're around. I know they're somewhere. I'll eventually get to them. But over the last few days, I've been thinking about, what am I going to do for a Wednesday video? Now, granted, it's not a crafting video, but a lot of the YouTube crafting folks will occasionally post videos where they discuss things. I'm a big fan of Professor Dungeon Master because he does crafting videos, but he also, quite honestly, does a lot of videos where he talks about the game and playing the game and alternatives to playing games and things like that. So I enjoy those. I don't do them very often, but I'm seriously considering doing some just because I'm always trying to find ways to improve the games I play, whether it's role-playing games, war games, even board games. I like a lot of solo games. So I frequently have made my own rules for games to convert them over to solo versions. But in this episode, what I want to talk to you about is a special word to me when it comes to gaming, especially RPGs, role-playing games. And specifically, I'm talking about fantasy role-playing games because I really haven't seen this in many science fiction games. And that's mainly because I don't play a lot of science fiction RPGs. I play a lot of science fiction war games and board games, but I don't really play a science fiction role-playing game like Starfinder or Traveler. It's not to say I wouldn't enjoy it, it's just I have to pick my battles. I have to pick the games I want to play. I wish I could be a full-time RPG and war gamer and play 3 or 4 games every day and just, that would be my career, but don't we all? So what I'm going to be talking about in this video is randomness, the word random. And I'll explain why this word has been on my mind lately. A few years ago, I used to write for a website called geekdad.com. I wrote for them for 7 or 8 years, maybe longer. I don't really remember. And I wrote on a variety of subjects. But I always found myself coming back to gaming, whether it was role-playing or war games or what have you. And so I would occasionally write articles that would focus on those kinds of games. Now, back in 2014 or 2015, I should look the date up, I wrote a series of articles for Geek Dad where I took the Dungeon Master's Guide, 5th edition, and it had a series of tables in the back where a DM could roll up a random dungeon. I think there were wilderness rules and things like that, but it was mainly dungeony, randomness. And this isn't something that 5e did first. There were random dungeon generation tools back in the advanced Dungeons and Dragons book, AD&D. The Dungeons Master's Guide back then had it. So let me take a step back real quick and tell you something that happened to me when I was a young gamer, wee gamer. All right, so a lot of you have heard this story. I started out in gaming by playing Metamorphosis Alpha. It was a science fiction role-playing game. I went with some friends to a gaming group in Pensacola, Florida. I think I was in 6th grade. I was in 6th grade. And there were no D&D tables available. They were playing Dungeons & Dragons, but all the chairs were taken. The DMs were not willing to let, it wasn't that they were against kids. They just didn't have enough spots. But thankfully, one of the referees there had a few chairs open for a Metamorphosis Alpha. So we sat down and we played it, and I had the bug. And I did play Metamorphosis Alpha quite a few more times, but I ultimately ended up finding a chair in the Dungeons and Dragons group. And so I played a lot more D&D than I did anything else. Now, granted, back in the day, a 6th grade DM was kind of unheard of. First off, I didn't have life experience. I had not read enough books, enough fantasy books. I hadn't seen enough fantasy movies. I just didn't really have enough in my mind or my head to in my opinion, I wasn't qualified to be a DM. So the early, probably 6th and 7th grade, I played a lot of D&D before I felt comfortable being a DM. And when I became a DM, it was mainly for my friends. I never really ran any groups outside of my friends. It wasn't that I was uncomfortable with it. It was just we played after school on weekends, and we just had our own little gaming group. So I guess if I had been asked to be a DM at the gaming group in Pensacola, I would have jumped at it probably. But looking back, I realized it's probably a good thing I didn't, because I was a very inexperienced DM. So one of the very first games that I remember playing Dungeons & Dragons, the guy, and I wish I remembered his name, but I don't, but the DM, it was a guy, and he had his GM screen. And this was the first time I'd ever seen one, because up to that point, I'd never seen one. The DMs that I'd played all had like a notebook and graph paper and things like that. But he had an actual like screen, and it wasn't an official one. It was something I think he made out of cardboard. And I did catch a glimpse of it because I asked him about it, and he showed me. And there were charts that he had like photocopied or typed up or something. It was old school, real old school. And he taped them in there. And so as we played, he rolled a lot of dice, a lot. All right, so in this video, I'm going to jump back and forth from then and now, because what got me remembering that was about a week ago, I recorded a video, two actually before this one, where I was rolling up a crew and the job and the background for a science fiction war game called 5 Parsecs from Home. And it was during the second video. The first video I rolled a lot of dice, but the second video I really rolled a lot of dice, because I was generating I was rolling for like the planet that I was on and what jobs were available and was there hazard pay, and and then I rolled for the enemies I'd be facing and what their weapons were. It was a lot of dice rolls, but I had so much fun doing it. I had forgotten how much fun rolling something up from zero was. So let's jump back to the early 80s. So this DM, he's rolling lots and lots of dice. We would come to a door, and I'm making this up because I don't remember this far back, but we'd come to a door and he'd say, well, you're at this door and there's a chain around it and it looks locked. And we would discuss, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And while we're talking, he's rolling dice. And I'm like, is he rolling them for real, or is he just rolling them to make us nervous? I think he did both. And whatever response we gave him, he would roll a die or dice. If we said, we inspect the lock, dice roll. If we said, is there a peephole? Do we think we can, you may want to, can we look under the door? Well, you can try. Dice roll. Everything was a dice roll. We would somehow manage to kick open the door or beat the door down or unlock the door, and we would go we would see what's beyond the door. He would roll dice, and he would tell us. And you could tell he was consulting charts. You see a hallway that is 10 feet long and dice roll, and then it turns to the right. I never really thought about it until recently. He was making that dungeon up as we went. And we were having a blast. It didn't matter that he didn't know where we were going. He knew about 5 seconds, maybe 10 seconds before we did, when he'd roll the die and consult the chart and then tell us. He was truly playing the game on the fly as a DM. Now, the charts obviously were helpful to him. It would tell him whether or not we encountered a random creature or creatures, or whether we encountered a trap or things like that. Now, I don't know which set of charts he was consulting. I suspect it was the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, because it was not too long after I got the basic set that my parents got me the AD&D First Edition Dungeon Master's Guide. It had been out for a few months or more, so I suspect that he had it, and he was using those charts in the back of the book, because I don't remember seeing any other Dungeons & Dragons random charts before that. I could be wrong, and if I am, please tell me in the comments. So, I remember I probably played at his table 4 or 5 times, and maybe more than that. I have fond memories of that game. I played a wizard. I remember that. I was a magic user. We called them magic users back then. And I remember my first magic user died like the second game I ever played, and I rolled up another one, and it didn't matter that the party had like a bunch of level 2s and level 3s. He just was like, he would find a way to drop me in there. And I was a level 1, and if the party kicked down the door and it was a bunch of monsters that were way beyond my level, I had to hide or run away, and he dealt with all this. So jump forward quite a few years, and I did DM quite a bit, and I got okay at improvising with my own players. But jump forward quite a few decades, 5e gets released. I'm going through the Dungeons Master's Guide, the 5th edition, and in the back I find these random tables. And they're really well done. I mean, it would tell you how big of a room or how long of a hallway and whether it had intersections and turn right, turn left. The charts would tell you whether there were cobwebs in the corners or what kind of, things were hanging on the walls. Lots and lots of details, lots and lots of opportunities for dice roll. So I was writing for Geek Dad, and I thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool to write an adventure using these charts? Now remember, 5e had just come out. I mean, people, DMs and players alike, were just starting to get familiar with the rules, the official 5e rules, not the beta that had come out. So there wasn't a lot out there in terms of just, adventures and things like that. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool to write a little module? I called it a module because that's what we did in the old days. And use these charts and document it. And now granted, this was a blog. It was a written note, not a video. And so I would take pictures of my dice near the charts that I was referencing, so the players could, or not the players, the readers would see that I was, rolling the dice and consulting it. And I think maybe once or twice in the entire adventure, I fudged a roll. I didn't fudge a roll. I said, I'm going to re-roll this because it doesn't make sense. It's like maybe a dead end where there shouldn't have been a dead end. I think I violated that like twice, but I stated in the article, here's where I'm re-rolling this to make sense. But for 95% of that adventure, I rolled it up randomly. So I wrote this series. It was 4 parts, and it was called Roll an Adventure, some other subtitle, and 4 parts over. I think I submitted it 1 part per week. Maybe it was every few days, but the adventure was called A Temple's Time, and it was basically the story of this temple that was built below this fighter had agreed to build a cabin on top of this hidden temple. He was lawful good or whatever, and his. When he retired, he agreed to he would live in this cabin that was over this buried temple, and he would guard it. And when he died, the temple needed to be like not desecrated. That's negative, but like unconsecrated. It was no longer being used, and the clerics didn't want it to be used for evil. So there was a backstory to it, something like that. But the point of this was I rolled that entire thing up using the random tables in the 5e DM's guide. And I'll put links, by the way, in the video description below where you can read those 4 parts if you really want to go and read them. I want to say that I published that adventure in one of the old Bexham's Bazaar issues. I may be wrong. I can't remember if I did that or not. We're going on almost 3 years of Bexham's Bazaar, so I'm starting to forget a lot of what's in there, or what I did in the earlier issues. But you'll find the links below if you really want to relive that fun time. But it was fun. I sat at a table and I I rolled the dice, took the picture, and then I would write part of the article and describe it. And I had graph paper where I was mapping, and I think I actually included photos in the articles of the graph paper as the dungeon like filled out. It wasn't a dungeon; it was an underground temple, but it was a dungeon, and it filled out, and it was totally cool. I just remember have fond memories of doing that, and I released it. It was very popular. A lot of people gave me good feedback on it and loved that I showed how the random tables could be used like that. Okay, where I'm going with this is my local gaming store, Titan Comics and Games, or is it Games and Comics? Titan Games, I think it's Titan Games and Comics. They have just put out the word that they're going to start up game night again. Now, game night used to be on the D&D role-playing game night used to be Wednesday night, and they're still going to have that. But they've also said they're going to run it on Thursday night, so 2 nights. Now, I used to DM for it. It was called Adventurers League, and it was really Wizards of the Coast would provide some content for us to they would provide like handouts and things and maps and stuff for the DMs if your gaming store I guess paid or enrolled in that program, the Adventurers League. But it was a way to get new players to come and try out the game, and if they liked it, they could come back, and we used a meetup system, the app Meetup. But players would register, and then they would come and sit down at a table. We usually had 6 chairs plus the 7th for the DM, and they had 4 tables. 4, 5? COVID, can't remember. I think we had 4 tables. And so, yeah, that's about right. So we had 28 players on a full night. And occasionally we would have people show up who were new, who didn't know about Meetup, and we'd find a place. We would say, sit down, we squeeze a chair in. You never want to turn away new D&D players. That's going to keep our hobby alive. And especially if they're younger, like kids. We had a lot of kids that would show up with their dads or with their moms and stuff. The parents would drop them off and say, is this cool? And we'd be like, totally cool. Put them in a seat. They'll be here in 2 hours. Come back and pick them up. And we would run games. And I did this for right up until COVID. I mean, I ran all the adventures that started in like 2016 or 15. I can't remember when the first one I ran, but I played the first one. I was a player for the Horde of the Dragon Queen was the one they were running when I came back into the fold. And then after that, I told the comic book store, you need a DM. I want a DM again. I had the bug again. So did that for quite a few years. And Adventurers League is great, but I don't want to say I'm over it, but I have so many other things I want to do with a fantasy role-playing game. And with Adventurers League, you have to stick to the story. Okay, you buy the book, and the adventurers get through it, or maybe they only go halfway, because Adventures League had a time limit. They would run for so many weeks or so many months, and then a new adventure would come out, and they'd just stop. And if you wanted to continue it, you had to do it on your own. You're at your home or somebody else's or whatever. But on Adventures League night, Wednesday, you ran what Wizards of the Coast wanted you to run. And the idea is that a player could sit in this seat, and then next week, let's say that chair's taken or my table's full, they could go to another table and pick up right where they left off. It never worked out that way. Maybe it worked that way for other gaming stores, but the DMs at Titans, we stayed in communication. We used a Facebook group a private one, to discuss where our party was and what we were doing and things like that. But honestly, very early in the game, you would do that. Like maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks, the DMs would be side by side, but after that, it was just spider effect. Some DMs ran the game faster, some ran it slower, some had break off quests that they did themselves, and the players would eventually come back, and it was fragmented. And that's not a complaint. That is what a game should do. It should go where the players want to go. So I tell you that because I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this. I hope many of you will. Pre-written adventures are all great. I've written quite a few, but they are a formula in the sense that they have a start, point A, and an end, point Z, and players tend to use the word railroad or railroading. What that means is that as a DM or a referee or GM or whatever you want to call it, the players sort of feel like they have free will, but they really don't. They're on a track, a railroad track, and certain things are going to happen until they get to the end of the story. They can't get off the track. That's called railroading. And most players don't like that. As a DM, you don't want your players ever feeling like their whole game is scripted. But unfortunately, when you're running a pre-written adventure, and when you're running it for Adventurers League, it does become very railroady. The DM knows what you're expected to get to, the point you're expected to get to. And in order to do that, you have to limit the player's choices. And anytime you limit the player's choices, they're going to start feeling that sense of, this is not an open-ended game where I can do whatever I want. And I think that's a bad thing, because when I was playing D&D, as I mentioned in that story earlier, the DM didn't know. He was rolling dice almost as fast as we could make decisions. And, he did some improv and things like that, but to a certain degree, there was no track. I mean, he didn't know what was going to happen that night any more than the players did. I miss those days. I really miss those days, because I ran a lot of games like that. I would sometimes show up as the GM with my players, and I would have like maybe 30% of the night's adventure sort of like maybe mapped out. I didn't know what the players were going to do, and I just made it up as I went. I had my monster manual, and I had my DM's guide, and I was good to go. So in this current time period where we have 5e, and we have Pathfinder 1 and 2.0, and we have Warhammer Fantasy. There's a lot of fantasy RPGs these days. And so you're not just limited to 5e, but they all have that risk that the GM, the Game Master, if they're not careful, they can make the players feel as if they're on a railroad track, that their decisions don't matter, because there is an end, a set end, and it's going to be reached no matter whether you go left at the tunnel or right at the tunnel. A while back, I backed a Kickstarter that just spoke to me. I wanted it. I read it. I did some investigation on my own. I missed out on the first round of books. And some of you already know where I'm going with this, because I've talked about it recently. The Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy. This is one of two tomes. There's a player's tome and a referee's tome. These collect 6 other books. You can buy. This is all of the spells, monsters, and some other tables that are split over like 3 or 4 books. And then the player's guide or player's tome is also like 2, 3, or 4 books that are combined. So you can get it in a 2-volume set, or you can buy them in these individual books. Right now, unfortunately, I just went to Necrotic Games website, and it looks like they're sold out. But I know that they've got to be working on some reprints, because this game is it's growing in popularity. A lot of people are really anxious to play it. GMs are referees and players. So this book right here, I got my Kickstarter in. I ordered the referee's tome and the player's tome, and I also got some extras just to as a completist, which is a curse. I like to have a little bit of everything, or like to have it all. But I read through the referee's guide or tome in one sitting. 1/3 or almost 2/3 of the book is all the creatures. I didn't read every creature. I read random ones and the ones that interest me. But most of this book can be read pretty quick. But what this book doesn't give you is any roadmaps. I mean, it's old school. It's meant to be played in a sort of a random nature. And by random nature, I mean the dungeons and the wilderness adventures. You have a script here, but it's not a script in the sense of it's not a script in the sense of that railroading. It's a script in the sense of turn-based. Like, each turn is 10 minutes. So during that 10 minutes, there's a chance that a wandering monster might appear. Party's going to discuss with the course of actions. Referee's going to describe it. End of turn, check spell durations, all this stuff. I'm really simplifying here. But the idea is that the referee you can create the adventure, but there's a structure here that provides for a randomness that I think the players will enjoy. Now, granted, I don't know. You can see the color in my hair. That's telling you I'm from the old days of Advanced D&D, and I think that the younger generation of D&D players, they might not find this as interesting as some of us older grognards. Look the word up if you don't know what it means, grognard. Some of us old grognards, we have very fond memories of playing the game like this. So after I finished reading this, I went and read the Player's Tome. And once I got that under my belt, an idea formed in my head. I went to the crew at Titans, and I said, "Listen, they had put the word out. They were looking for DMs, GMs, whatever." And I had not said yes or no yet. So I went into the store and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm interested in GMing again, but I really don't know if I want to be locked into an Adventurers League story, a pre-written adventure." I said, what I really want to do is I'd like to try to run a table of old school essentials, and I think they were aware of it. They, or at least some of them indicated they were. I said, I'd like to run an old school essentials game and, advertise it so that the players who know what it is and are interested in that can have time to buy the Player's Tome, which you can get as a PDF. If you want the print copy, like I said, it's out of print right now, but if you want to play, my only requirement to sit at my table, this is me telling the team that I'd like to play this, and if I do, and if you're cool with it, my only requirement would be that the players have a copy, digital or print, of the Player's Tome, so that they know what's expected of them. Because the Player's Tome is just like old school D&D. The leveling is different for each class. There are races that are classes. There are not as many classes as there are in 5e. As a matter of fact, I think there's 20? I think there's 15 or 22. I can't remember. It's a big number, but it's not 5e number. But it's the standards. It's fighter, thief, wizard, cleric, and then some random ones like ranger and stuff. There, and I don't have it with me. There is a zine that Necrotic is putting out. I don't think it's any period of time, a regular period of time, but it's called Carcass Crawler. I think it's called Carcass Crawler, and I got the first issue 0, which was a Kickstarter reward, and in it they include, I think, 5 or 6 new classes. So it's up to the referee whether you want to allow them, and I probably will allow them. But I'm going to make the first time you play at my table, I want you playing from the Player's Tome, because it's limited. I have a copy, so I know what to expect. There's some changes with this game. I mean, it's going old school again. So treasure, not fighting monsters, is really the main way you level up, because for each gold coin collected, that's an XP point. So if you've got 5 players and you collect 10,000 gold worth of treasure, each player is going to get 2,000 gold or 2,000 XP, and you consult your chart to see what that does. Granted, I'm not, as a GM, there's no way I'm allowing my level 1 players to go home with 10,000 gold worth of treasure. They might find 20 or 10 or something, but it's sort of slow moving. But and players' characters are squishy. We all know that term. They're soft on the inside, and the creatures are not so forgiving. A lot of the players are going to have to learn to run away or hide, because there's going to be a lot of dying. But what I'm ultimately looking forward to is running a random dungeon. That's not to say I won't have some things planned, because I will. There's got to be some sort of, I like to run with terrain and things like that. So there might be 1 or 2 surprises per night. But the idea is I want to run an old school dungeon where the players, and I've got the story sort of going. I'm not going to share it now, but there's going to be a way for the players to go into the dungeon, and it's levels. The lower you go, the more difficult the monsters become. the more the treasure you find, things like that. So level 1 is easy. Level 10 would be very deadly to anyone at level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably. My other reason for doing this is because if your character dies, which is probably going to happen, because I'm probably going to roll. I haven't decided if I'm going to roll in the open or behind a screen. I'm going to use a screen because there are a lot of things I want to reference. But traditionally, I like to roll in the open. I like the players to see my dice rolls because I don't like to fudge dice, especially on combat and things like that. So I want the players to really get a sense that there could be death around the next corner. You need to behave properly or your character will die. And even if you behave properly, your characters may die. The other thing I want to do is I want to allow players to drop in. And I think I've developed a mechanic for that, a part of the story that will allow, like if you die and you need to roll up a level 1 again and everybody's level 3, you can come in and play. You're going to be weak, but it's your job to build back up. I've got a story mechanic in mind that will allow new players and existing players whose characters die to easily fall into the game. I think my only limit is going to be chairs. I'm probably not going to limit this game to 6 players. I will probably go up to 8 if the store would let me, maybe even 10. I don't know. I have to ponder on that. But 8 definitely. And they may say we don't have room. You can only have 6. Okay, 6. But if they'll allow me to have like 8 players, I will do it. There may not be 8 players wanting to play an old school game like this. I'm ready to accept that as a truth. If that's the case, if no one is interested in this, then I'll probably find a way to run a 5e adventure. I've run plenty of 5e. I have no problem with 5e. And I'm happy to run it again if that's what the players want. But I want to offer something that I would enjoy running, and I'm hoping I can find some players that would enjoy playing it. So we shall see, which reminds me that I'm going to need to go have another chat with the crew at Titans to see what the schedule is and what their thoughts are on that. So let's circle back to the word random. I think there is value in sitting down at a table with a GM. Let's assume you're the player. There's value in sitting down at a game where you're playing a wizard or a fighter or a thief or a cleric or any number of classes that the game supports. You don't know what's going to happen that night. You want that mystery, you want that danger. And for those of us who've been playing this game a very long time, the thought of that brings back fond memories. I have played a lot of D&D games, 5e, where I didn't feel the players truly felt they were at risk, at danger. A lot of times when you bring 6 level 1 characters to the table, even though they're squishy, they still have a lot. They bring a lot of power, and a lot of the spells, are powerful. And the feats and things like that. I mean, even low-level characters, I felt sometimes that players just didn't have that nervousness when they sat down. Like, am I going to make it through tonight? Could I level up? Will we find that magic item that pushes me right over the limit? I want that sense of excitement and wonder and nervousness at the table. If I could record the sessions, I absolutely would. I don't think I'm allowed to do that. I don't know. I'll ask. But again, being a game crafter, I want to make sure that I'm not going really old school where it's all pen and paper. I want my players to have the ability to bring a miniature to the table. I want them to be able to see a scene on the table in terrain or a map or whatever. But I don't want it to be all the time. There needs to be some imagination and some descriptiveness on my part as the DM. I need to bring more of that to the table so that my players will be able to see the site. If they can't see it on the table, they will at least see it in their mind. And the randomness part of this game allows that. There are charts in here for rolling up, random creatures, random treasures, random magic items. Design a dungeon, page 12. Just really slick stuff. But again, it doesn't go into so much detail that the GM feels locked in. This is just a guidebook. There is not enough here for a first-time DM, a first-time GM might have some difficulty running this game. There's not a lot here in terms of helping a novice GM play the game. No, it's not bad, but this is definitely meant for I think, in my opinion, it's meant for experienced GMs and players. No, experienced GMs to run. It's not meant for experienced players. But anyway, Old School Essentials. I will include a link in the description below so you can go read up on it. I believe you can get all of the content in PDF format. A lot of you probably do want print copies. If you're like me, I like to print. I get them both, print and PDF, but definitely keep an eye out on the Necrotic Games website so when they come back in stock, you can grab one. All right, I don't know how long this video has gone. It's been broken up into pieces, and I do apologize for not having a craft for you. I hope, fingers crossed, to have a craft video for you next week. I've got the rest of this week and the weekend to try and get my workshop back in order, but keep in mind I'm also helping my wife get the kitchen in order, the living room in order, the kids' rooms in order, the garages. So I'm not able to focus all my time and energy on my workshop. I wish I could, but I'm trying to get just enough where I could possibly throw together a quick craft and record it. So we'll see. No promises, but I'm doing my best. Thanks for joining me in this video. I really wanted to get this sort of off my chest. That's not the right phrase, but this has been sitting in my mind for some time, and I'm getting very excited about the idea of running Old School Essentials. I'm definitely going to run a game at the Mace convention in November of this year in South Carolina. I definitely want to have it available to play. I may run a game each night or each afternoon. I don't know. I'll find a way to do more, hopefully more than one, so players will have an opportunity to come back to the table if they really enjoy it. We shall see, but I will keep you informed on how this goes with the gaming store. If I do get approved on a game like this and have players that actually want to play it, I will let you know how all that is going. All right, all I have left to do is to invite you to come join me and 5 of my fellow guild masters over at the Tabletop Crafters Guild. This is the Facebook group where we post photos of our crafts, we answer questions, we ooh and ah and congratulate people who share their own photos and creations, and we just we use it as inspiration to improve our games and our crafts. If you're not a member, come join us. It's the Facebook group, the Tabletop Crafters Guild. I'd like to also invite you to come join the Tabletop Engineer Facebook group. That's my group, and it's very similar. I post things I'm working on. Members who've joined it post their stuff. We answer questions. We talk back and forth. I do some other things on that page. I do a live show and tell each week, usually on Thursday. I probably will do one this Thursday, even though my workshop isn't set up. And then on Friday, I typically do what's called Paint a Pair of Minis. I missed last Friday because it was moving. Thursday and Friday was moving days. But I typically try to paint a pair of minis, and I do this on Zoom. And if you're a member of the Tabletop Engineer Facebook group, on Friday mornings I post the time and the login credentials and all that on the group so that you can come and join. It's kind of fun. You can log in with your camera, or you can just do audio. And while we're painting, we chat and laugh and crack jokes and all kinds of stuff, and it's just fun time. Please, if you are not a listener of the Indie Invasion podcast, I highly encourage you to check it out. The 2 guys that run it, Eric and Mac, they're friends of mine, but they are ultimately just these really 2 cool gamers. They like to get on their podcast and they talk about independent game companies. A lot of times it's mostly war games. I don't think they do RPGs. They might. I don't think I've ever I think they may cover RPGs, but it's mainly war games, and it's usually they have these things called shorts, which last 30 minutes. You can listen. I listen to them in my car over and over again because they're just perfect for driving. At least for me, I enjoy listening to them. They make me laugh. I'll put information in the video description below if you want to check it out. But it's called the Indie Invasion Podcast, and it's just really fun. It's getting popular. These two guys, they spend a lot of time behind the scenes getting it ready so that they have people to interview, they have games to talk about, they share things. So definitely go check it out. All right, that is it for this week's video. Again, I appreciate you joining me and listening in. If you have any comments, post them below. I'll do my best to answer them. And just appreciate your time. I hope to be back next week with a craft video. We shall see. But until then, this is Jim, the Tabletop Engineer. Everybody, take care.